He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
And we are live. Well, welcome back. It's the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. I'm your co-host, Jack Heald, with Philip Ovadia. Joining us today is Alexander Cortes, otherwise known online as Ajac. Phil,
how you doing, gentlemen?
Why the heck do we have this a Broscience guy on here?
Well,
he's never been fat.
Exactly. Probably to much of our audience, Ajac won't need a introduction. Honestly, Alexander was one of the early people I came across in this space, and as you know, the world tends to work out. We ended up interacting more and more and getting to know each other through some mutual connections. And he's one of the people who I've certainly been wanting to get on the show for quite a while, and we finally made it happen here. So Alexander's really been one of the, I would say, leaders in the online movement around health and fitness in particular. And he's really done some, what I would say are groundbreaking, innovative things to bring the fitness movement to the people as it is. So excited to hear about his story and to get into that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over and let Alexander kind of fill in a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in the fitness space, and then we're just going to have a great conversation from there.
Yeah, I'm good to be here, guys. Background for those who don't know me. So I'm 33 now, and I've been a personal trainer since I was 20. So that's the only professional job I've ever had, my professional role. So I've been working with clients for, going on essentially 13 years. And I started personal training when I was in college, and I didn't originally plan on making a career in fitness, but as it worked out, I'm still doing it to this day. And I've trained probably well over 10,000 client sessions, hundreds of clients online. I've certainly worked with tens of thousands of people. And I realized many years ago that there's three fundamental desires all human beings have. There's three things everybody wants. We want health, we want relationships, and we want wealth. Relationships and wealth, those are not my areas, but health is. And as the saying goes, very cliched, if you don't have your health, what do you really have? So trying to get people healthy, that's my MO. That is what I strive to do. And relative to the general population, as I call it, regular people, people who are not super fitness enthusiasts, but regular people. If you're going to help those people, you have to make your solutions very workable, very practical, pragmatic. And the play on Broscience, as I call it, it's this idea that if you take hard science, clinical data, clinical evidence, research-based study, and you combine it with real world practicality and application, you get this mixture of Broscience, where you're going to have a lot of anecdotal evidence. You're going to have some stuff based on the current state of the evidence. You're going to have a mix of N=1 kind of situations where, like, you want it's working for this person, keep doing it if it's getting the effects we want. So that's sort of the crux of my practice. But it's also like a pun of itself, since bros, as a term there's a connotation to it that you must be an idiot, especially if you're in fitness. There's an assumption that personal trainers and guys who are like bro enthusiasts, bro culture, that everybody's dumb. It comes with the territory. So that's my way of sort of flipping it.
Yeah, and I'll fully admit that that bro moniker kind of is a way for the healthcare professionals, all of my colleagues, I think, to try and look down and discredit guys that are doing this that don't have the proper letters after their name. Fully admit, I've admitted many of my past mistakes, and thinking that same way. And then as I opened my mind, as I started asking those new questions, those different questions that we talk so much about on these shows, I found guys like yourself, the bros, teaching me about actual science and how people work and how to bring this to the real world. One of the things that I've always found interesting about what you do is, how you were able to translate that from, the one-on-one sort of traditional personal training model, in the gym working with someone to bringing it to the masses, the online programs and everything that you are so good at doing. So talk a little bit about how you kind of got into that space. How did you get from just personal training in the traditional sense to being, one of the leaders in online personal training?
So, personal training, as you said, it's a one-on-one job. You're talking with somebody for an hour. It's a coaching experience. It's a highly personal experience. And over the course of a week, optimally, maybe you see them 3 times and they come in on their own as well. More likely it's once or twice. And you're hoping that you're instilling these good habits, good practices in them. And that experience, of course, doesn't scale, but as an experience in itself, it's an educational experience. You are acting as an educator, you are a teacher. So that's all I did for 7 years straight, the first part of my career. I just only trained in person, didn't do anything else. And I realized at a certain point, like, okay, how can I turn this into a business? How can I help people ethically and profitably? The way I see it fundamentally, I cannot guarantee a positive change in your mindset or your motivation or whatever your psychological obstacles are. Trying to deal with human psychology can be very nebulous, very vague. There's many theories on personality and how to cultivate intrinsic motivation, self-determination theory. Are your issues from childhood? Do we need to apply more cognitive behavioral approach and talk through them with solution-based practices? Like, that's not my role, obviously. That's the role of a psychologist, therapist, psychiatrist. That's not my role. My role that I know I can objectively help you in is that I can give you really good, effective information that, if applied properly, will have a positive effect. So I want to make it as simple as possible, where if I tell you to do A and that gets you the outcome that you want, awesome. What we're doing is working. You know that it's working. Now you have some confidence in the process. So I want to make it as action-based as possible. So with online training, with online education, what I realized is that most people, when they get online, we could get into their deeper issues, but fundamentally, everybody's just looking for good information, useful information. And I knew from my days when I was a teenager, I was 15, 16, I was going to the drugstore, looking at muscle magazines. What most people look for, certainly most men, is good workouts. It's very cliche again, but like, we open up a magazine, it's like, let's just scroll through the workouts. What am I gonna do for a workout? I know I did that behavior, many, many times over. And I'd see guys at the gym, I'd see people going to the gym, and they do the same thing. They'd be on their phones, they'd be in a magazine, they'd be pulling out a book, something they'd rolled up, a newspaper, whatever it was, some kind of literature, and they'd be looking for a workout to do, for a routine to follow. Just give me steps. Tell me to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tell me to do what exercises. Okay. And so when I decided to work in the online space, I'm like, what's the best way I could educate people and help them? I could give them a plan. I could give them a workout program, a blueprint, tells them very clearly what to do. And it's, of course, on them if they follow it, don't follow it, but the actions are there. And if they do them, they get positive outcome. They build muscle, they lose body fat. A metabolic physiological change takes place. So I always oriented all of my online marketing, all of my online offerings around crafting and spreading those simple solutions to people. And it's been extremely successful. There's no other word for it. At this point, if I look at the stats, I've had something like 80,000 people purchase my programs the last 5 or 6 years. And I've gotten feedback from, obviously not all of them, I've gotten feedback from probably close to 2 or 3% of them, pretty good conversion rate. Thousands of people of before and after photos. I lost 20 pounds, I put on X amount of muscle mass, I improved my my blood pressure went down, my heart rate decreased, my blood work improved. I went to see my physician. I solved my pain. I don't have knee pain anymore. I don't have back pain anymore. Or I'm older, and you helped me, train pain. You helped me train pain-free. My shoulders are not hurting for the first time in 30 years. So I get positive feedback constantly. And of course, I'm always trying to refine what I'm doing and offer people better and better blueprints and practices. But having that solution-based approach and relying on more of like a technical offering of actual instructions versus let's say more of like a bro marketing aspect of like over promising, I'm going to put 40 pounds on you, here's how to add 3 inches to your biceps. I'm like, none of that's actually happening. For anyone that actually works with the human body, there are obvious physiological boundaries in place that preclude superlative results happening overnight. It's a long-term process. So I sell people on that, and they apply it, they use it, and it works.
I'm fascinated with. Phil, you missed it. I told Alexander, I think I've probably followed him on Twitter longer than anybody else I followed on Twitter. And I've watched, I was even there when you got banned. And I was part of the free Ajac community.
It works.
But I've been fascinated by your success in particular. It's not like there aren't, I don't know, 500 million fitness trainers on Twitter. Why Ajac? Why is Ajac successful? I'm asking you. I don't know the answer. Now, I have some theories, but I want to hear your idea.
I believe the reasons I am successful, if I had to pick 3 things. Foremost is that I have what you could almost call clinical experience. I have applied practical experience of working with people one-on-one. And very few people that I've seen in the fitness industry actually have that. Because of the social media, digital marketing tools we have available, you can have a very good physique. You have a great body. You're a guy, or you have a great body. That already gives you authority. Automatically.
Right.
Okay, you have a great body. And if you market yourself well, you can sell yourself, you grow an audience. And you do. Okay, you're successful within that lens. Whether your workouts or your information is good, whether any of it's actually valid, it's a whole different question. For myself, I never want to be known on the basis of what I looked like. I don't show my physique too much until very recently. Even I didn't really show my physique. I didn't show myself working out so much. I want to be known for having practical knowledge that is proven out in the real world. And if you apply it and use it, and it gets a result, oh wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I want to build a reputation based on my knowledge, my intellect, and that all that's come from working with people. And I think I've done that pretty successfully. And at the same time, because I have that practical experience, being able to express yourself and articulate yourself well, especially online, how you write is expressive of your ability to think. If you've never spoken to anyone, if you've never talked to anyone, if you're not someone who is a teacher and you've spent years teaching a subject, it's very unlikely you're going to be effective at teaching that subject en masse online. Maybe you will. It'll probably be very scripted. There'll probably be maybe someone else taking over that process. And for in my situation, I've been teaching for years. I still teach, so I'm very much at ease with talking about what I'm doing or instructing people, whether it be verbally live, whether it be written word. So that ability to express myself through writing, that's probably more than anything else fundamentally built my career. This because I can tweet a lot. I write a lot, basically. I send a newsletter every week, multiple times a week, writing to people. My programs, I have a very high output of program solutions for people, something around, I've lost track at this point, something around like 60 something programs I've written the last 5 years or so. Like every month I'm coming out with something else, whether it be for the back or legs or knee pain or shoulder health or chest training or something oriented for the over 40 crowd. I'm always crafting something of, okay, here you go, this works for you, go use it. And all that has a network effect over time where people know it's like, wow, this guy's, his output's really high. He's always answering questions. He's always sharing useful information. He seems at least like he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to continue to choose to follow him. And he's also not resorting to viral marketing or I call this like bonehead marketing.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pick up on the latest trend and piggyback on it and make it about myself. I'm not doing TikTok challenges. You never see me doing anything grotesque that way, as I look at it. Well, over time it builds credibility.
That leads to the next question, which is, and I want to lay the foundation here. You have a fairly eclectic set of interests for a gym bro. In other words, if somebody didn't know that your métier is fitness and just read the non-fitness types of things that you write, they think you were a college professor.
Maybe.
You've got a really deep and broad set of interests that you've shared. I can remember in particular a set of tweets that were referencing some of the ancient Greeks. You've done a lot of research into fitness historically, going back, it looks to me, thousands of years.
Yes.
How in the world did you get into that? I mean, when I realize it's books and there's libraries and you can go find those things, but why you, when those other 500 million trainers haven't ever done that? You're literally the first guy in your realm of the woods that's ever done that. And to me, it levered your credibility up in my mind massively. Oh, this guy is really interested not just in making big muscles, but in the entire history of fitness and how it's developed over time. I'd just love to hear you talk about how you got into that and one of the fun things you found, and maybe some of the stupid things you found.
Yeah. So I've always had this obsession, this like overall like personality obsession of like, why did this happen? Why do we do these things? Whatever it is, I want to know why. It's like a little child. Why? You just keep asking why. And it's like, shut up. Like I don't have an answer anymore. So I was always asking why. Contextual to fitness, there's lots of things we do in fitness. I mean, the scope of fitness practices, from the exercises, like why squats, why deadlifts, why bench press, why compound movements. Why are these things that we believe are good? Like, why do we think they're good? What are the premises behind this? So I was always asking this question, why? And I mean, I've had this attitude my entire career. Like I'm always trying to self-examine my knowledge. And in fitness, you realize it's a very broad field. How do you even accurately define health? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be healthy versus fit? There's all these sort of philosophical questions that arise. And I've always been a student of philosophy. And so, the first few years I was, studying fitness, beyond the technical information, which is, sort of the clinical stuff. And a lot of that's even very vague and not very well known. I realized like you have to approach it as a philosophical field. You have a combination of science, then you also have the application of art. And your ability to think about it is going to determine the quality in which you practice. So you have to be a good thinker. Now, if you want to be a good thinker, the best thing.
I'm sorry, don't just go blowing right by something that profound. I like to put a pin in these things when somebody says something that is profound. If you want to have a good quality of life, you've got to be a good thinker. I think I quoted you correctly there.
Yes.
With my head injury right now, God knows what you actually said, but that's what I heard. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow.
Oh, you're good. No,
but that's
all.
big stuff, man. That's seriously big stuff.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on that, to get your perspective of, how do you figure out the good information out there? Because, fitness, nutrition, the reality is that you can find the data, the science as it is to support, just about anything you want to believe. No one's really done, a whole lot of randomized controlled trials on fitness routines. So how do you decide what is useful and what is good information, which you then incorporate and you pass on versus, the garbage that's out there, and 95% of the, 500,000 trainers, like Jack said, are out there are garbage. So, how do you get through that problem?
So to answer that question, sort of reference back to Jack's question, about the history of like why I got so deep into history. One of the primary filters I use is always looking at historical evidence. So we know quite provably that people have been healthy before in the past. It's not. This is not like an arguable point. It's like, have people lived to be the age of 80? Yes, we know that they have. Okay. have people live their life and been physically active their whole life? Yes. Like, yeah, we can go, whether it's archaeological evidence, whether it's, whether it's just, what would be the term for it? Not archaeological, whether it's, sort of like cultural, historical evidence, written evidence, like, okay, people have been living a long time. We know that exercise has been done since really the dawn of recorded history. We can take the evolutionary biology approach of like, okay, what were we hunting in 1000 BC? What was ancient Stone Age man eating? Like we know roughly approximately what it means to be healthy. You have to be able to move, you live a long time, you're not dying horribly from disease. Okay, so my bias for my main filter is what has been done over time. If there are certain practices that have been done for decades, centuries, hundreds of years, thousands of years, and we can see these training traditions or these eating practices even that have been done for very, very, very long periods of time that routinely produce exceptional health outcomes, we should study those things. We should weigh that as like, okay, that's significant. Something in there is right. It is correct. It is truthful. It's good information. It's good practices. It's reflective of our biology. Like that has to be investigated. In the 20th century, I mean, and this gets very meta, as I call it. With the shift in medicine in like the 1930s, 40s, where there was this push towards like a molecular view of biology. So this idea, this is like sort of a rocker, you could get very conspiratorial theory, but this part is true. Like there was a big push, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, where the Rockefeller Foundation funded many science departments across the United States to push towards studying basically like molecular theories of biology. And this was reflective of like the petrochemical industry of like, okay, like we've got this ability to manipulate petrochemicals and matter on this, very minute level. That's pretty cool. Like that's super cool. A lot of great stuff's come out. I'm not, critiquing it that way, but because we can study these things and because it's so profitable at the same time, we want this to be the emphasis. And I think what you saw the last so many decades because of that is that there was this divorce from anecdotal historical evidence to clinical evidence and study. And the issue that takes place within academia and within the clinical academic environment is that it's very easy to come up with what I call sort of like medical jargon based theories and ideas about how something works. And then you start crafting studies and you start doing research for the sake of proving out your premises being correct. And this is always the battle in science of like, okay, I have a theory. I really want my theory to be right. How can I massage the data and massage the study, and how can I view the body in a certain way that will prove what I already think to be true? If you're a good scientist, whether you have the credentials or not, if you are an honest, good ethical scientist, you are always trying to prove yourself wrong in everything that you do. You're not trying to be right. So, and then now, based off of that, what we saw, like I said, the last many decades in medicine was like low-fat theory, cholesterol theory, or sort of calories in, calories out, which calories in, calories out is true, on a thermodynamic basis. But now, we know today that there's more factors to it than just the calories. There's satiety, there's the quality of the food, there's where the actual macronutrients are being eaten. Does that play a role? So we're getting better. But when you have these certain, essentially pet theories that then become industries into themselves, that then a bunch of drugs are built off of, to treat, you got like a multi-headed monster at that point. It's like, what's the problem there? I'm like, if you back it up a whole bunch of steps, it's like the problem was the premise from the very beginning. Like, are we sure that cholesterol is the issue? Is it just the cholesterol, or is that a side effect of the systemic inflammation and the excess calorie intake and the lack of activity? Did the food choice play any role at all? No, it's just cholesterol. Like now we're getting very isolated. And the human body is like a complex, multimodal system. Reducing any complex system down to a single input, single factor, you're either going to be incredibly brilliantly right, or more than likely, high probability, you're going to be incredibly wrong.
I can remember back in the early 80s when some of the first of the really incredibly stupid medical advice became popular. I remember in particular, eggs are bad for you and butter is bad for you. And I had two thoughts. Thought number one was, that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But the second thought was along the lines you talked about. The human body is an almost indescribably complex mechanism, set of interlocking systems. I want to hear about the test they used to nail down this particular conclusion. And the reality is, most of the time, the tests are bad. I've got a friend who's makes a medical device, and he's working on building a clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he found out is that the average number of participants in a clinical trial sponsored by the National Institutes of Health, yes, the NIH, guess what that number is? Average number of participants in an NIH-sponsored clinical trial, 19.
I was going to say 20, so.
19. So all of that is to say, there's an awful lot of just shitty research that's passing for science out there.
Oh, yeah.
I love the prove it in the gym point of view that you bring to the table.
I mean, well, this is the replication crisis, of course, in science. I mean, this is not a new thing. Like, I remember reading articles about this. I mean, probably about a decade ago, and it's across multiple fields. You know, so the social sciences are the most notorious. You know, science is psychology. Is it really a science? We've talked about that. Yeah, but even the hard sciences, even biology, even medicine, you test. You know, and I'm not the first person to. This is not made up statistic on my part. Like I think I recall something like the head of like Harvard Research Review was openly saying like at least half, if not more, of all studies done today, and literally in all fields, are bullshit. They can't replicate.
Yeah,
It's a bad study, bad design. Like, we've got theories now built off of research done years ago that's never been even replicated in the first place, but we're still believing it.
Oh yeah, I
mean, this is the replication crisis.
Most recently, we've got that in Alzheimer's. There was a theory that was promoted in the mid 2000s,
yes,
about the origins of Alzheimer's, and it got something to do with some plaque in the brain. Turns out that the data was falsified, and there have been billions of dollars spent chasing
around like $2 billion.
This non-existent situation. So, all right. So, what do we do? Help us out here. We've indicated there's a problem. Let's make it better. How do we fix things?
How do we move forward? So yeah, tell us a little bit from your perspective, what you see. So one of the big questions I think that always comes up that, would be good for us to talk about is the, I guess you could say nutrition versus fitness. And although they're not exclusionary, you always get into this conversation about what should come first, what needs to come first. If someone is unhealthy, can they exercise their way out of it? Can they eat their way out of it, improve their eating to get out of it? Or does it really take both ultimately to, achieve good health?
I mean, it takes both. Like this, optimally nutrition and fitness, or I should say nutrition and exercise, optimally they run on a feedback loop. Exercise tells your body what to do with the food you consume. That is the way I like to look at it. It's the way I phrase it to people. Like, how do we change our physiological function? How do we change our metabolism? By exercising, we're expending energy. We build our body's overall capacity for energy expenditure, which is critical for longevity, for health, for basically being a robust living system. So we're expanding our body's capacity. We're building up our tissue. We're changing how our body metabolizes fat, glucose, protein. We're doing all those things. And yes, it's true that enough exercise can counteract the hypothetical effects of a supposedly bad diet. If your energetic expenditure is high enough, you can, quote unquote, get away with bad eating. Why? Because this is the term that's used as a metabolic flux or G flux. If your metabolic flux is extremely high, if you're expending 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 calories a day, at that point, you do need to essentially fuel the machine. You need energy to expend energy. And there's recent research on this that for people who exercise a lot, we're talking like double-digit numbers, upwards of 15 to 20 hours a week of exercise. their metabolic rate is almost always to have their calorie intake. It's very difficult for them to actually, gain weight, obviously, or to even eat enough to meet it. Like over time, they'll steadily get leaner, their body will start to slow down. And this is why training for those high intensity, high expenditure individuals goes in cycles. All of that said, that's not most people.
Yeah.
Right. Like that you are, if you're exercising more than 10 hours a week, you are an outlier. You are in the 1%. The overall picture is that, Pareto, power distribution, 80 to 90% of people exercise less than 3 hours a week. They're largely inactive. And for them, the food that they ingest, that's going to play the biggest role in their health, by far. The amount of exercise you objectively need to be healthy, not ultra elite fit, running an Ironman, competing in, powerlifting, CrossFit, just healthy. Where, okay, what I define as healthy blood pressure, healthy heart rate, healthy glucose sensitivity, relatively mid-range, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, everything that's sort of in the middle. Like, okay, your normal body weight, BMI roughly lines up. Okay, that's healthy. The amount of exercise you need to do that is, for strength training, less than 2 hours a week. For aerobic activity, maybe about 3 to 4 hours a week, but largely low intensity walking. If you walk a half hour to an hour a day and lift weights twice a week and don't eat too much, just eat as much as you need, you'll be healthy. It doesn't take that much. But what kills people today, of course, it's the food environment. Like we live in an obesogenic society. If you don't think about what you're consuming.
Obesogenic, did you say?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Obesogenic. I've never heard that word.
It's a real word. It's a real word.
I'm putting that one into my vocabulary. We live in an obesogenic society. Okay.
Yeah. That's a good word. Like the modern environment is set up to make us obese. Yeah. It is. Whether you can get very particular with breaking it down. It's like, well, how? What? Well, most people commute. Okay, that's one thing. So we're not walking much. Most cities, certainly the United States, are not designed for walking. Period. You look at the quality of food in schools. The way the rise of fast food industry. Even the rise of food on demand now. So most people over the course of time will steadily overconsume calories. They'll end up gradually becoming overweight. As they get into their 30s, they'll start to lose lean body mass. And then you end up, you end up in that middle age. It's like, wow, I kind of go overweight, but maybe you didn't think you were that fat. It just kind of crept up on you. What do I do? So to counteract this, you have to be mindful of your inputs and your intake. And that's where, getting into like, well, what are you actually eating? You have to change what you're eating. I try to make that very simple for people. Like, what's a good diet? Good diet is simply one that meets your caloric needs, macronutrient needs, and then hopefully your micronutrient needs. If we break that down further, I make this really simple for people. Your body's made out of protein, so you need amino acids. You need to ingest protein. Protein keeps you really full. Funny enough, there's books going back to this like Dr. Atkins' original kind of theory, which he was quite correct in a lot of ways. Like high protein eating, it keeps you full, minimizes these rises and falls in blood sugar, ensures a stable level of energy, less likely to binge, get cravings. You got protein intake. If you're eating whole protein sources, which is basically meat, dairy, eggs, there's going to be accompanying fat intake that will help with satiety and satisfaction and a lot of micronutrients. And then you have your carbohydrates, which complex carbohydrates or even simple. And when you combine simple carbs with a fat source, they do digest slower. And if you can do that in reasonable moderation of eating at maintenance, your weight will stay the same, more or less. If you're exercising for that bit on top of that, you should be good to go. Like your blood work, everything else, your weight, you should be healthy.
So walk 30 minutes to an hour every day, weight training twice a week. For most people, that's going to keep you healthy, assuming that you're eating somewhere in the neighborhood of not like a moron.
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
But Alexander, it can't be that simple, should I be doing 4x10s or 3x8s or my drop sets or, weight all too often I find people get caught up in the minutia of, how many grams of this should I be eating? How many micrograms of this, should I be doing, the 4 sets of 10 or the 3 sets of 8? It's just like, well, just get off the couch first, and then we can, eventually get to that problem to have.
Yeah, I mean, the irony of this, if you look at like the actual clinical data, and there's a lot obviously on diet intake, on fat loss or healthy body individuals over time. There's a lot today on exercise science. The clinical data indicates that all diets more or less are equal in terms of macronutrient proportions. So whether you're eating high carb or low carb or moderate protein or high protein or low fat or high fat, so long as you ingest enough calories and if your weight stays roughly the same, you're fine. Like most of staying healthy is simply maintaining a normal body weight. If you can do just that, you are preventing a whole horde of problems that come with being overweight, obese, just normal body weight. So the exact macros of whether was it 40% protein or 30%, like what's the percentage of my carbs? I'm like, it doesn't really matter. It's if you just going it by numbers, that becomes very arbitrary. We know what our basic needs are for human nutrition. We know we need protein. We know we need some amount of fat. We know we need some amount of carbohydrates. The arguments about carbs being like essential, non-essential. This is like my best example. Look at the macronutrient composition of human breast milk. Human breast milk is 87% carbohydrates. And somewhere around, I think I believe it's like 5-6% fat, the rest is protein. So mother's milk, when a woman is feeding an infant, she's feeding them mostly carbs, basically. So I mean, I would argue carbohydrates are preferred fuel source for human beings. Having a steady and ready supply of glucose is essential for good overall metabolic function and health. Maybe later on in life, if you're metabolically dysfunctional, if you've been obese for a very long time, you're dysregulated. Okay, I'll entertain the idea that maybe completely eliminating carbs, being in a permanent state of ketosis, maybe that is better. Yeah, maybe it is. Yeah, sure. We could certainly, hypothesize about that. The people who are doing that right now will know in 10, 20 years whether that really works out for them. I'm curious to see that.
Yeah.
But, point being, we know carbohydrates are fine. You need protein, you need fat. So you just need to ingest them in relatively healthy amounts, moderate amounts overall. And then the exercise, I've become very critical of this in the fitness industry, more on Instagram, my newsletter, than maybe on Twitter, but so much of fitness and fitness practices, you can create a lot of complexity if you want, but it doesn't accomplish anything more than doing things the simple and straightforward way. If you use the example you gave, stuff like drop sets or cluster sets or supersetting or circuit training, none of that makes any real difference. If you look at the exercise science data, the best, most effective way to train is to do basic, what's called straight sets. You just do one exercise at a time, or maybe 1 or 2 or 3 sets. The minimum effective volume is doing one set for an exercise. If you just did one hard set for an exercise and you did 8 exercises and left the gym twice a week, you'd make gains, you'd grow. It's one set, that's all you need. You can do more, of course, but one set. It's not 5, it's 1. But doing simple straight sets, one exercise at a time, that gives you the best results for strength gains, muscle gains, pain relief, linear progress over time. All the other stuff that you can do, whether it's drops or clusters or pyramids. I always tell people, if you want to, if that seems cool, have at it, go ahead. But it's not making your training any much better at all. Arguably, it might even make it worse because now you're introducing complexity where simplicity would have sufficed.
I like it. I like that a lot. I'm a big fan of keeping things simple, mostly because I just seem to be genetically predisposed to complicating things, and I found that doesn't really work for me. I want to follow up with this idea of keeping it simple. We've had, let me drill down a little deeper. We've had a couple of different guests. One was an orthopedic surgeon. One was primary care doctor, both of whom made the same statement about people with bone-on-bone pain who got metabolically healthy. They were queued up for surgery and ended up not having it because even though they were still bone on bone, the pain went away. I question both. I question both of them about it,
Mhm.
and neither of them really had what sounded like a good scientific answer for why
Mhm.
they got better. My question for you is, because you've trained so many people, my guess is you've seen something similar. Have you seen that kind of thing where people are dealing with joint pains that would typically be indicated, typically would indicate surgery was necessary? They got healthy and didn't need it. Do you see that?
Oh, yes. So pain is complex. Pain is complex, but the way to encapsulate that complexity. So pain is biopsychosocial. So there's a biological aspect to pain. There's a psychological aspect to it. And then you have a social aspect, which is sort of the environmental aspect. And all that adds up to the pain experience. Your cells, other than themselves, so you have your arm, any part of your body, you don't have pain receptors, you have neurological receptors. Pain is an experience processed by the brain. And I mean, this is how numbing works. Like when we numb tissue, like what are we doing? We're stopping the pain receptors? No, we're just basically stopping the neurological flow from that area to the brain itself. You literally can't feel it. It's not registering. Within sort of your four-dimensional your four-dimensional neurological homunculus, that your brain has. For people who have joint pain, joint injuries, definitely there's a biological component. Your cartilage is worn out. Yeah, like your rotator cuff is just torn up. I mean, there's lots of things. Your meniscus, like like my ankle's got a ton of scar tissue. Obviously, you can go with any joint. It hurts. Okay. So yeah, there is a biological, physical component where I'm sure it is damaged. Like if you were to image it, it might look damaged. At the same time, though, you can have individuals, and this is very common in radiography with imaging. This is why imaging is actually very notoriously unreliable for diagnosing joint issues. You can have people who supposedly have damage on an MRI or X-ray. They don't feel anything. It's a surprise to them. It's like, hey, did you know that you have a Bull's disc? I do. Really? Yeah, and this is so notorious that when I say notorious, when imaging is done, like if you take like a massive imaging and it's self-reported, like is the person experiencing pain or not, half the time people with supposed damage don't feel anything. Then half the time you'll have people with no apparent imaging issues who are reporting extremely high levels of pain. So clearly something's not matching up, or maybe the imaging it's not showing what we think it's showing. Human beings are also very notoriously unreliable. Where I forget what the specifics of this particular study were, but basically it was 100 X-rays were taken. They showed them to physicians. Those X-rays were just the same 10 images, I think, like over and over and over again. They kept coming up with different diagnoses for the same image just to find something wrong. Yeah, the AIs are far better at diagnosing based off of imaging than people are. So to make that point, like, okay, so these doctors are physically seeing something. Is that really what's happening? Maybe, maybe not. You have to recognize you might be unreliable in your diagnosis. So you have the biological aspect. You have the psychological component where once people get conditioned to pain, they expect to be in pain or in more pain. And like that creates a negative feedback loop. Oh, the doctor told me my shoulder's destroyed. Oh God, now if I do anything, it's gonna make it hurt more. Am I hurting myself more? Oh, you're sensitizing yourself to a painful experience before it's even happening. If the doctor told you nothing was wrong, doctor, my shoulder hurts. Well, your imaging's fine. Must have just been a random pain. Don't worry about it. Oh, okay. And there's clinical data on this. This has been proven out with sham surgery studies. The knees in particular, where people have meniscus tears. They go in, we're going to do surgery on your knee. There's no surgery done. They get put to sleep, wake up, nothing ever took place. Knee pain's gone. There's no physical change that's taken place, but because the brain mind thinks that it's been fixed, it's decided that it doesn't hurt anymore. So that's the psychological aspect.
This is deep stuff here, man.
Yeah. So there's that, and so then lastly, you do have the social environment, which that's the input from your doctor. That's the input from the gym you train at, your friends, the people that you know, the culture that you live in. Different cultures handle pain differently. I've traveled abroad. Like in the United States, we have this molecular chemical biased view that we can treat everything with drugs. Essentially, it's like, okay, this hurts, painkiller. I have anxiety. Here's an anti-anxiety drug. I'm depressed. Here's an antidepressant drug. Like I mean, I've had a number of minor injuries over the years where I thought I had maybe fractured something in the wrist. It healed on its own. Like I know how to treat my body. Every time I've ever have gone in for anything, just to just maybe have an X-ray done, I always get offered painkillers. I'm not asking for them. It's like, like I remember it last year. I thought maybe like, it felt like I broke off like a piece of my kneecap from having my knee collide. I'm like, that feels weird. Let me just have a cheap X-ray done. Went to urgent care, took an image of it. Oh, okay, a little bit. You busted off a tip. Does it hurt? It's not that bad. Okay. Do you want me to send you a prescription? Like I give you a prescription for whatever. Well, I'm like, I don't want a prescription. I'm fine. Like I don't need to treat the pain. I mean, the pain injury of itself, that's a whole thing we could dive into, how we regard pain. But
maybe next time.
Maybe next time. But to make a comparison, if like, so Thailand, I lived in Thailand for almost a year. I trained Muay Thai. The Thai attitude towards pain is very different from the American attitude. It's a different social environment. If you are hurting there, especially in like a fight environment, unless you are grievously injured, deal with it.
Suck it up, buttercup.
You're going to be okay. The body, like there's a very different Eastern belief, Oriental belief, that the body has recuperative powers, that your mind is going to affect the experience. So if you believe your body's still strong and you're willing to work through it, and maybe you modify training as necessary. You don't just quit. Like you'll heal. It will be okay. That's why it's very rare to see guys take tons of time off from an injury. Unless they literally broke their leg or something. Your wrist is hanging off, that you can't even lift it. Tendons are torn. Okay, like get surgery. If not, you just work around it. Do what you can. You'll heal. Believe that you can heal, and you'll be fine. Now, I'm being reductionist with it. It gets deeper than that because of their the religious aspects for them. But you compare that to the U.S., where every minor pain, stomach ache, cough, doctor, I want an antibiotic. I want it right now.
Yeah.
You have a runny nose. Give me the antibiotic. Like we love drugs. So summarize all that. So pain being biopsychosocial, all that creates this experience, that mental experience. Whether that is impeding your ability to heal, from a joint injury, or whether that if you start training and you start believing that you can get stronger, and there is an analgesic effect, and I totally butchered that. There is a pain deadening effect from exercise resistance training. That's clinically proven. The most reliable way to treat pain without drugs is exercise. If you do a general strength training program with machines twice a week, 1 or 2 sets to failure, your body will hurt less, you'll have more energy, your muscles will feel stronger, your flexibility will improve. All these things will improve without necessarily addressing them correctly. And it may be that, your knees, shoulders stop hurting. And then you don't need the surgery.
I love it. Years ago, over 20 years ago, I loved to play basketball. I was on the court all the time. And I was getting older and came down with a rebound, and my knee hurt so bad. It was, I realized at that point that the pain was greater than the fun. And it was literally the first time in my entire life that the pain hurt more than the fun felt good. So I quit playing ball and ended up going to a doctor, a surgeon. Guess what the surgeon told me? I need surgery. Yeah. Well, I was scheduled to leave the country for an extended period of time. I said, nah, I'm gonna postpone. I don't want to get surgery right now. Where I lived overseas, I lived in a 3-story flat. My bedroom was on the top floor, so I had to climb 3 stairs multiple times a day, 3 sets of stairs multiple times a day. The office I worked in was on the 6th floor, and I would usually just take the stairs. By the time I got home a year later, guess what?
You didn't hurt.
Knee felt fine.
Yeah.
And that was just one of a myriad of experiences I've had like that have made me somewhat skeptical about the accepted approach to health and wellness and healing. Phil, I love this guy. I could just sit and talk all day long, but I realize this is actually your show, and I probably need to shut up.
No, I think that was a great discussion. And I think, to bring that point around, a lot of improving our health really just comes down to stop damaging your health, stop eating the crap and stop, just sitting around being inactive. And the body can heal a lot of this stuff if we just stop actively doing damage to it. Before we wrap up, though, I want to hear a little bit more, Alexander. You mentioned, you had spent the year in Thailand and you were training martial arts over there. And it was a fascinating journey to kind of follow online. And I think, it was as much maybe philosophical as it was, physical. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, what you learned over there, what that experience was like, and how it changed some of the ways that you approach a lot of the fitness stuff these days.
Yeah, so that was 2020. So when COVID was happening, lockdowns, that's where I was. So I had a great year. 2020 was an amazing year. Training Muay Thai specifically. So Muay Thai is Thai kickboxing, and it's been practiced there for, depending upon who you ask, like it's been done for at least about 5 centuries. So it has a very, very long historical background. The Kingdom of Thailand, it's very old. That's been a settled area for thousands of years. Their culture is very old. So their training practices haven't changed in many centuries. They train twice a day. The training is obviously very cardiovascular. There isn't anything that really resembles modern strength and conditioning in the Thai way. The emphasis is on the skills, building fundamentals with the movements themselves, and then also encouraging you to run like as often as you can. When I was there, it was beneficial on a personal level. You're a man, you're learning how to fight, it's reinforcing your masculinity. We could talk about that. But, from a fitness standpoint, it was really fascinating for me because so much of what we believe in the United States about sports training or strength and conditioning or exercise, it's very, what I just deem weight room dominant. We want to believe that you got to be in the weight room, you got to be lifting weights X amount of hours a week. That's going to make you a magnitude, orders of magnitude better athlete. That's important. Then you have these athletes there, these Thai fighters, who don't do any of that. They train all day doing the sport itself, and they run, and they have longer careers and way more fights and way less injuries. And their approach to training is much more holistic. And so it led me to question a lot of okay, we have this whole strength conditioning bias in American fitness. Maybe a lot of it's wrong. Maybe lifting weights isn't so important for sports. Maybe being muscular, it's not just about being muscular. There's other aspects of physical capacity and ability with your elasticity, with fascial health, with your ability to balance and rebound. Maybe these things are worth diving into. So, it's a lot of things to list out, but it was a very good, welcome form of cognitive dissonance, since it led me to examine, okay, what am I wrong about with, what I currently think? Maybe I'm wrong about a lot of things. And that's kind of what got me into, actually. That's in fact what catalyzed the ancient Greek studies. I'm okay, these guys have been training the same way for literally 500 years. How were people training 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago? And you find out cool stuff. You learn cool things. One of the biggest ones that I realized was that squatting, as we do today, the barbell back squat, that's a very recent phenomenon in terms of exercise. Only in the last roughly 100 years has the squat become this dominant movement that we're told that we must do it. It's the king of exercises. Yeah. When I was studying the ancient Greek historical records, of which a lot exist, there's no record of them doing squats at all. None. You can't find anything at all in ancient Greek that describes a squat motion. Nothing. Now, what you can find is a lot of recommendations for running, for uphill sprints, basically, for wrestling. There's a whole list of exercises that are actually described in literature. It's stuff's again, 2,000 years old. Okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. This is for general conditioning. This is for power. This is for explosive ability. There's no squats. That's oh wow. Okay, so maybe this movement that we think is so essential for sports performance, is it really that essential? One of the things I questioned years ago when I was actively training clients, every day was, I'm testing people on like their squat mobility, but is this a test where it's set to fail? Is it reasonable to test somebody on something that you already know they're going to be bad at and that they never do? Like, how is that a good criteria of assessment? Which that was sort of its own. Like I wrote a couple of newsletters and almost treaties on this. Training legs is important. Don't get me wrong. Like you want to be able to go up and down. Like it's very essential to have strong legs. But this idea that certain exercises are absolutely critical. Like, are there other ways to train legs? Can you lunge? Could you leg press? Could you do split squats? Could your squats just be done with lighter weight? Do they have to be done heavy with weight on your spine, on your back? Is that so critical? I don't believe it is at all.
I want to thank you for that. I was back squatting for a while, and I'll confess, I loved it and hated it. It was the most emotionally intimidating lift that I would do. But it was also such an emotional rush to do a big squat.
Oh yeah.
And then I read you wrote may have been a Twitter thread or maybe a newsletter, I don't remember, but it was something along the lines of 22 reasons not to do a back squat. I don't remember exactly what it was, but you said something along the lines of 100% of my clients who do back squats get injured. and I had recently just been injured.
Yeah.
Doing what? Back squat. And
yeah.
It convinced me at that point that there were other ways to get the same work accomplished without, as much as I loved it, without putting that bar on my back. And I no longer back squat. I still deadlift. I love to deadlift, but I don't back squat anymore.
That's good.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, this is like exercise always has to be customized at the highest level. So I mean, I can always be critical of certain lifts. That's not to say that back squatting should never be done. There are people where they have very optimal anatomical structure. You can put a bar on them, and they go up, they go down. It looks great. It feels good.
I'm 6'4" and slender.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So like you don't have the optimal mechanics, the optimal body structure. But what you see this as like I said at the beginning, I've always had a bias for historical evidence. What I noticed as I just went through my career and studied new guys who've been training a long time, is that at some point or another, everybody that squats heavy, that really made that a focal point of training, they can't do it anymore. This is, I will readily admit, there's no like hard clinical data on this. It'd be very hard to assess a bunch of veteran lifters and ask them. This is based off of gym experience. But everybody that I know who's a hardcore lifter that's 40 and beyond, it's 100%. All of them have gotten injured squatting, whether it's a spinal injury, whether it's a hip injury, whether it's some combination thereof, whether it's a hernia, whether it's neck, whether it's shoulder, like something hurts and they really struggle to do it, if they even do it at all. Most of them don't. I have one good friend of mine, Donnie Thompson. He actually beat great guest for the show, but so he was the first guy to total 3,000 pounds in the squat, bench, deadlift, and equipped lifting.
My God.
Yeah. So he had over 1,000 pounds on his back. When he broke that record, and he still squats to this day. But the way he squats, he uses a specialized bar. He does a very specific warm-up movement preparation on his body to handle that much weight. He squats to like a Bosu ball or a box. He's jerry-rigged the lift and made it very specific of, and he's very cognizant of this. He's like, I am trying my absolute best to minimize all the potential damage from this exercise. He doesn't squat with a straight bar at all. He has a special curve bar. It minimizes the shoulder stress. It minimizes spinal stress. Allows him upright torso. All these things. I'm like, okay, so that's intelligent. That's one guy. Everybody else has had horrible, grievous injuries from it.
Yeah.
Now these are high level lifters, right? These are guys like they're Iron Brothers. Okay, for the average person, average Joe in the gym, do I want you doing a lift that at some point in the near future is going to leave you kind of injured, that then takes you out of the gym, that then breaks you of your training practice, that then discourages you from the process? do I want you doing that? Or could I get you stronger, build muscle, build the habit, keep you consistent, doing something else that's just as potent and effective, but safer? I'm going to go with the safer option. Yeah, I don't care about whether you think the lift is tough. Like, there are far better ways to measure your masculinity and machismo than how much weight you can lift on an exercise. Like, it's cool. I love lifting heavy weight. It's fun. Every guy loves lifting heavy weight. You like slamming the bar down or seeing plates rattle. Like, of course that's fun. Of course it is. You can do all that and still be broke and poor and divorced and kids hate you. Like, it's a poor, like I said, it's a poor metric of masculinity. It's very temporal. Like, I would not build your identity around that. I would really discourage it. You know? Unless you are truly elite and that's your thing, right?
Yeah.
If that's your thing, that's your thing. 99% of guys, that's not your thing. It's just something you do to have some muscle and hopefully look good with your shirt off. You know, don't take it so seriously that way.
So what's next for Ajac? What do you got coming up soon that we can look forward to? What are you working on?
The short-term pipeline, I have a lower body training guide that I'm writing right now. I just released one on back training, which I was really happy with. So I upgraded sort of my team that helps me with my products. So I've really been able to take this what I think is a really phenomenal anatomical approach with, you know, illustrations and videos showing very concretely, you know, like I was saying, like, this is how you train effectively. These are the exercises, the sets, these are the reps. Here are examples for everything. Here are visual models. Like, it's a fantastic resource. So the lower body training guide, that will be coming out in about 4 weeks. That'll be released. My wife just gave birth to our first son, like,
Congratulations.
3.5 weeks ago, almost 4 weeks ago.
Congrats.
Yeah. So I'm a dad now. So that's cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's my
So
favorite job ever.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to sort of basically seeing him grow up and being a father. Yeah, then long term, I'm completing that training series essentially of like how to train products. And I finally have the necessary setup to film a YouTube channel. I have a home gym now that I outfit and equipped and got the cameras and everything. So that'll get going this month. Yeah, so basically just trying to create more resources for people, more educational resources.
Very good.
Great.
Well, I would like to point out that I've seen a handful of Alexander's videos on how to do particular exercises, and they are hands down the best I've ever seen. And I've watched a lot. He breaks it down. He makes it simple. He shows the right way and the wrong way to do it. I'm usually doing it the wrong way. So I'm a big fan of Alexander's videos.
Thank you. That's good feedback.
Yeah, I would certainly echo. I think anyone looking for some good fitness resources, I would point them your way. So why don't you tell people the best place to find those resources?
Yes. So Twitter account, obviously I have AJA_Cortes. I have a Twitter account. So yeah, I tweet pretty much daily. My Instagram has a ton of, you know, short form exercise tutorials, and I think I've got around 50, 60 at this point of just how to do particular exercises and train correctly. And I've been seeing a lot of people there is because, you know, having a visual example, you know, that's the best way to learn, right? And then I have my newsletter on my website, cortes.site, and the newsletter usually goes out about 2 or 3 times a week, and that typically will cover various fitness topics, subjects more in depth, whether it be progressive overload for nutrition, or pain, like a biopsychosocial model I've talked about, treating low back pain. So that's more long form content of how to solve specific problems, issues that arise, and what to do.
Very good. Well, we'll make sure all of those show up in the show notes for both the audio and video versions of the show. I would love to sit and talk with you about historical ancient sources and what you've learned, but we're way past time on this.
Oh, okay.
Phil, anything else we ought to do before we wrap it for the day?
No, another great conversation this week. I think people will get a lot of useful information out of this and keep moving forward towards better health.
Absolutely.
I hope so.
All right. Well, Alexander, I appreciate you being here with us. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since Phil booked it. For Philovadia, I'm Jack Heald. This is the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. You can follow Phil on Twitter at iFixHearts. You can take his metabolic health quiz at ifixhearts.co. And you can contact him and see if you can get him to just take care of your health in general at ovadiahearthealth.com. And we'll talk to y'all next week.
America is fat and sick and tired. 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy and at risk of a sudden heart attack. Are you one of them? Go to ifixhearts.co and take Dr. Ovadia's metabolic health quiz. Learn specific steps you can take to reclaim your health, reduce your risk of heart attack, and stay off Dr. Ovadia's operating table.